topic for today is nutrition in human. Okay. So as we know, we need a lot of nutrition to survive, right? So let's check into that how our body is getting different type of nutrition that we need. Okay. So first, let's learn about what is nutrition. What do you mean by nutrition? So basically, nutrition is the process by which human take in food, right, and utilize it for energy, growth, repair, and the maintenance of the whole. Clear? So that is what we basically meant by nutrition. Okay. Nutrition is the process by which human intake, right? Take in food and utilize it for energy, growth, repair. Okay. Repair and maintenance of the bone. Clear? Okay. Now, it has some steps, right? What are the steps? It involves several steps like ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and ejection. So, what are the steps? The steps are called ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and ejection. Now we have to learn each and every step in detail. Okay. So first I'll show you one figure related to our digestion process. Okay. With the help of the diagram, we can explain it into further. So let's take a look into this figure. Okay. So here we can see the flow, right? How the food is reaching into our body. Through the mouth, we will take the food and it will be moving through the esophagus and all. Then it will reach to the stomach. Then through the stomach, the digestion will happen. Partial digestion will be occurring from the stomach, and then to small intestine, large intestine, in between liver, pancreas, bile duct, everything has its own function. So we have to learn about that. So let's check one by one in detail. Okay. So the first step, as we mentioned, the first step will be ingestion, right? So what do you mean by ingestion? Basically, it is the process of taking food into the body through the mouth, right? So it is the process of taking food into the body through the mouth. And the food is chewed by teeth into small pieces. So while we are taking, whether it is vegetables, fruits, or rice, whatever it is in a bigger form, right? First, we have to convert that into a smaller format. That is why we have to chew it. Okay. So what is our first step? Food is chewed by teeth. Okay, into smaller pieces. That is what we call as mechanical digestion. And the tongue will help in mixing food with the saliva, right? So we have saliva in our mouth and it will be mixed with the saliva and it will help for swallowing as well. So that is the duty of tongue. And saliva is secreted by salivary glands. So there is some glands inside our mouth that is called the salivary glands that will help you to secrete the saliva. Clear? So that is what we call as ingestion, intake of food. Okay. Then once we have the food, then what we have to do? We have to digest it, right? So what does mean by digestion? Basically, digestion is the breakdown of complex food into simpler soluble substances. So the complex food item should be break down into simpler format. Then only our body can accept it, right? So basically, digestion is the breakdown of complex food into simpler soluble substances. So digestion is happening in different steps. Okay, what are the steps? First, it starts in the mouth. Then digestion is also happening in the esophagus, then in the stomach, and in the small intestine. Okay, so we have to learn each in detail. So let's check one by one. So let's check the digestion in detail. Okay. So first thing is, as we mentioned, what is the definition of digestion? It is the breakdown, right, of complex food into smaller soluble substances. And the digestion is starting from the mouth, right? The digestion is starting from the mouth. So what is the first step? Like we mentioned, saliva contains the enzyme called the salivary amylase. So here we have mentioned that saliva will be mixed with the food from the mouth, right? So the saliva contains an enzyme called the salivary amylase. It converts starch. Okay. So it converts starch into carbohydrates. Okay. That is simple sugar molecules. Okay. So the starch, that is the carbohydrate into simple sugar molecules. Okay. That is also called the maltose. Then the food becomes soft and forms a bolus. Like it is a kind of like soupy nature, right? Instead of the thick contents, it become much smoother, one, soft and smooth. Okay, so that will be very easy for us to swallow it, right? Then we have the esophagus. The second step is through esophagus, right? So what is the function of esophagus? Digestion in esophagus. So there is no digestion occurs here. Instead, what is occurring there? The food moves to the stomach by peristalsis. So the movement of food to the esophagus is called a peristalsis. Okay. So it's a wave-like muscular movement. So when the food is moving to the esophagus, so the esophagus will be like this, right? It's a tube like this. So when the bolus, so let's assume that the bolus is moving like this. Okay. So when it is moving to the esophagus, so the esophagus will be having a movement like this. Okay. So this is the bolus. Okay. So this movement is called a peristalsis, the food movement to esophagus, to the stomach. And now we have to check what is happening in the stomach. So we know that a lot of acids and a lot of functions is happening in the stomach, right? So the stomach secrete hydrochloric acid, our HCl. Okay. So it makes the medium acidic and kill germs. So as we know, a lot of germs will be there in our raw food and the food we eat, right? Whether it is vegetable, fruits, meat, whatever it is, there will be a lot of germs. So we have to kill these germs. So that is why we need HCl. Okay. And then we have the pepsin enzyme. What is the duty of pepsin? It breaks protein into simpler peptides. It breaks protein into simpler peptides. Okay. So what you have to keep in mind that we may not be, our body is not able to absorb everything in its initial form, whether it is carbohydrate, protein, or what fats, whatever it is, we need to convert that into simpler molecules or simpler forms. That is what we can learn in the digestion part. Okay, so how it is occurring. So we mentioned about two things: HCl for killing the germs and also it makes them medium in the stomach acidic. Then we mentioned about pepsin enzyme that is breaking protein into simpler peptides. Then the stomach wall turn food into mix with the digestive juices. So the stomach walls will change. These movements and the pressure and everything will change the food into a mix with the digestive juice. So the HCl, pepsin, everything is added to the food. And food becomes semi-liquid. Okay. So the food's structure will change into a semi-liquid format. That is what we call as chyme. Okay. That is what we call as chyme. Clear? Now, after the long process in the stomach, the food will later move into the small intestine. Okay. So this is the most important site of digestion. Okay. So the semi-digested food will now uh, move to the small intestine. Okay. So when it is reaching to the small intestine, okay, when the food is reaching into the small intestine, before it reaches, a lot of juices will be added to this chyme. Okay. So first thing is from pancreas. So we have the pancreas here. You can see it here. So the pancreas will secrete pancreatic juice. Okay. So why we need pancreatic juice? To digest carbohydrates, proteins and fats. Okay. So we need the pancreatic juice to digest carbohydrate, proteins and fats. And what is the function of liver? We have the liver here, right? Liver is mentioned here. It is the liver. So the bile juice, right? The bile juice is produced by liver. And why we need bile? For fat digestion, by emulsification. So the bile will help you to digest fat through the method of emulsification, right? So the enzyme that complete the digestion. So from the small intestine, what will happen? The digestion is getting complete. So the carbohydrates will become glucose, protein will converted into amino acids, and fats are converted into fatty acids and glycerol. Clear? So this is how our digestion is getting complete. Okay. And now what we have to do? So now we ate the food. So the food done the mechanical digestion from our mouth, and the rest of the digestion is completed from both stomach and the small intestine. All the digestive enzymes were there, and every content of the food we ate now become a smaller units. Now what we have to do? We need to absorb it, right? So the next step is absorption. Where does it occur? The absorption start from the small intestine. Okay. Absorption start from small intestine. Now absorption. Okay. So what is absorption? It takes place mainly in the small intestine. Okay. So whenever we intake some food and then it's get digested and all, the next step will be absorbing the all needed nutrients from that particular digested food, right? So that occurs in small intestine. Majority of portion will be occurring in the small intestine. And for that, we have an inner lining called the villi. So the small intestine's inner lining has a finger-like projections called a villi. So it will help to increase the surface area of absorption. Okay. And the nutrients like glucose, amino acid, fatty acids, and all these will be entered into the bloodstream. Okay. So let's see the villi first. So this is what we call as villi. Okay. So you can see the structure. It is a finger-like structure, right? It is a finger-like structure. Okay. So all the nutrients, okay, all the nutrients while it is passing through the small intestine. Okay, the small intestine has a structure called a villi. So it will be like this. Okay. So everywhere it will have a structure like this villi. Okay. So when the food is going through like this, okay, what will happen? All these nutrients will be get absorbed into this bloodstream. Okay, so the villi has the bloodstream, so it will be absorbed in the blood. So that is what happens in the small intestine for absorption. Okay, and after absorption, what will happen? In the small intestine, majority of the absorption is completed. Now, what will happen? Then the assimilation occurs. Okay, what is assimilation? The absorbed nutrients are transported to all the body cells through the blood. So now the absorption, till the absorption is completed, right? So why we need these nutrients? Why we are absorbing these nutrients? For the purpose we have mentioned in the earlier stage, right? Like repairing, growth, energy production, all these, right? So the blood will carry these absorbed nutrients to each and every part of our body. Okay, each and every cells in our body. So that is what we call as assimilation. So what is happening here? The absorbed nutrients, right? They are transported to all body cells through blood. Okay. So the cells use nutrients for what? Energy production, growth, repair of tissues, etc. And excess glucose, okay, they will be stored as glycogen in liver and muscles. So this is what occurs after absorption. That is called assimilation. So still there will be some remaining part, right? Even though like just imagine you are making a juice. You are putting just imagine you are making a pineapple juice. You will be using pineapple. You will be using sugar, water, whatever it is, ice cubes, everything, and you will make the juice. And after that, once you made the juice, you will just filter it, right? After filtration, you will have some waste, right? In the filter, you will have some waste. So that waste should be removed, right? That is what we call as ejection. Okay. So the last step will be ejection. So what is ejection? What is that? So ejection is the removal of undigested and unabsorbed food. So there will be some undigested and unabsorbed food, right? So that should be removed. That is what we call as ejection. So it occurs through the large intestine. Okay. So once the absorption in the small intestine is completed, then it will move to the large intestine. Okay. And then to the anus. Got it? So large intestine absorb water and salt. So what is getting absorbed in the large intestine? Water and salts. Okay. And the remaining waste forms feces and excreted. So the rest will be excreted to the ants. So this is how our digestion is completed. So what were the important step we mentioned? First we have to intake the food, that is what we call as ingestion. Then the intake the food should be digested, that is what we call the digestion, and it occur in mouth, then through esophagus it will reach in the stomach, then digestion in the stomach, then to the small intestine, and then from the small intestine absorption will start, and all the needed nutrients like amino acid, glucose, fatty acid, everything will be entering into the bloodstream through the villi, finger like projections in the lining of the small intestine, right? And then assimilation occurs, that everything will be get distributed to the cells in our body, and they will be using that for energy production, growth, the repair of tissues, everything, right? And the remaining will be removed as waste, right? Through the process called egestion. Okay. So these are the things that we have to learn about the human nutrition. Okay, how do we get nutrients from the food we eat? So be very careful with the terms like peristalsis, what is occurring in stomach, what is occurring in like happening in small intestine, large intestine, everything. Okay. So the process are ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion. So these diagrams are also very important. Okay. Sometimes you will get questions to uh, mark the part in the diagram. Okay. So remember these diagrams and all, and revise the portions. Okay.